To start this off, a little about me. I'm 20 years old, a woman, and not completely ugly. So sometimes I get creepers and it sucks. I work as a bagger and a cart pusher at a big grocery store chain while simultaneously going to college full-time. You meet all sorts of interesting people at work, which is where this story takes place. A few months ago, while I was doing my regular assigned duty of pushing carts inside from the parking lot. It's pretty physically exhausting, especially during the summer, but it's a good workout. We have a little sidewalk island in the middle of the parking lot for people to walk up to the store without worrying about getting hit by cars. It's got a few benches, too, where you can find the occasional elderly customer resting. I had picked up a run of about 5 small carts and was headed across the flat part of the sidewalk island when a man sitting on the bench called out to me. Customers calling out to me is nothing new. People have questions all the time. But this man didn't have a question. He proceeded to tell me how pretty my hair was, and that it was such a nice contrast between red and black. Really, it was more like awkwardly dyed auburn, but I digress. Normally, such a compliment doesn't bother me, but he immediately followed up with a bunch of weird questions about me, like where I was from and how long I worked here and whatnot. All while I was in the parking lot with a bunch of carts that I needed to get inside because it was busy. I brushed off his questions as politely as I could, but he still followed me halfway back into the store. After I got inside, I glanced out to see that he had returned to the bench, which faces our front doors, and that he was staring at me. Weird. But it was the 5 p.m. weekday rush, so I didn't really have the brain power to question it beyond that at the time. Over the next 2 hours, every time I glanced out there, he was there on that bench staring at me. He hadn't bought anything, and hadn't talked to anyone but me. At this point, I'm sort of freaking out, so I got to Robert, one of the other cart pushers. Robert is built like a building and generally intimidating to look at, but he's as gentle as can be. I asked him to take over my cart duties until the weird dude goes away, which he agreed to. About 45 minutes pass before Robert tells me that he can't see the guy anymore. I figure it must be safe to go outside now, right? Wrong. I get out to the first cart corral and begin collecting carts to pull in, when the same guy from before comes out from behind a parked car and starts in on me. I'm alone in the parking lot, and it's getting dark. He's angry. He wants to know why I've been staring at him this whole time. I'm staring? I'm staring? He insists that he's been doing nothing wrong but just sitting there and is generally acting very threatening. He's got about 6 or so inches on me, and I have no doubt he could outrun me if I made a break back inside. I don't remember what I said to him, but I know I was trying to placate him, and also to ask him to please leave me alone. It's about 8 p.m. at this point, so most customers have gone home. The parking lot is almost empty. Thankfully, I got saved. A middle-aged woman, another customer, comes up and asks what the trouble is. The guy takes a look at her, realizes he's outnumbered, and storms off for the hardware store next door. I thank the woman profusely, and we both go inside to talk to my manager about what happened. My manager says to tell her immediately if that guy comes back, and she'll take care of it. Thankfully, the guy never comes back. I don't know who he was or what he was after, but I'm so glad that woman decided to intervene. I worked in a call center for a few months while waiting on some better employment opportunities. My work was about 40 miles away from my home, and my shifts didn't end until 10:30 at night. The road I take to get there is fairly isolated, with few places to turn off and fewer houses. Just long, winding stretches for miles. One night, as I make my drive out of town, I notice a car turn and begin taking the same streets I was. At first, I didn't think of it as a big deal. Just somebody probably taking the same roads to get home. I take the turnoff down the back road that I usually use to get onto the long old highway, and the car follows. At this point, I'm still not too suspicious, but I've never liked to have people follow me too close behind at night, as their headlights are blinding in my rearview mirror. I turn one more time, and the car still follows behind me. Now I decide to speed up a bit, to put some distance between us, and give me my sight back. As I begin speeding, so does this guy. Now I'm beginning to feel worried. Why is he trying to keep up with me? For some reason, I didn't think he might be a cop. I'd take corners at full speed to try to get this guy off my tail, and eventually, when I realized I'd reached 90 miles per hour, I slowed down to see if he would pass me. He simply slowed down with me and continued to follow along behind me. At this point, there were a few stories from Let's Not Meet running through my mind, and the thought that this guy was following me home had me terrified. There was nowhere safe for me to pull off the road for miles here, only small farms and such. So I just kept along until I saw another car ahead of us. I decided to try to pass, and put this car between myself and my stalker. As I passed the car, I quickly turned into the lane again, only to see the guy pull in right behind me. At this point, I decided that as soon as I reached the next turn, I would pull into the old post office on the corner. No one was in the building this late, but there were always a car or two parked outside, and they always left the lights on. I get to the corner and turn on my turn signal. I note that the guy's turn signal is on and going in the same direction I am. I suddenly book it in front of the building, and the guy quickly turns in the opposite direction. I just sat in the spot for a few minutes, watching to see if the guy would come back. I did not want to go home if he did. A few other cars passed by, and eventually I drove home. This was probably the single scariest moment of my life. To this day, I am still scared when people start tailing me too closely, and I always watch the cars behind me to see if they're going the same directions I am.